Hello and welcome to another episode of the Emigrate Canada CIC News podcast. My name is Monty, and as regular listeners will know, I've spent the last 25 years promoting Canadian immigration all around the world. And I'm here to spread the message that immigrating to Canada is actually pretty easy and very straightforward as long as you have the right information. This is why I made a best-selling guide called Canada Made Simple. It's available all around the world through Barnes & Noble, Amazon and all great booksellers at less than $30. I can absolutely say this is going to be the best $30 you're going to spend in this entire expensive process. You're going to find out exactly how to make your own application straight from the experts. You're going to save literally thousands on so-called migration agents and lawyers' fees, and even if you are planning on using an agent or a lawyer, then find out about the process in detail so you can ask them the right questions at the right times and make sure that your agent is on point. There's also a ton of things you can do yourself to save loads of money on lawyers' fees and to help speed up the process. I cover all aspects of moving to Canada, such as express entry, federal skilled worker, federal skilled trades, Canada Experience Class, work permits, spouse visas, student visas, and troubleshooting an application. And before we move on, you can find out more at CanadaMadeSimple.com. Today we're going to talk about which relatives you can sponsor for Canadian immigration and provide an overview of how you can sponsor those relatives to Canada, such as your sister, brother, or other family members. Now, it's well known that Canada welcomes well over 100,000 family class migrants each and every year, and most of these newcomers to Canada arrive via the spouse, partner and children category of visas, while a significantly smaller number arrive under what's called the Parents and Grandparents Program, often referred to online as PGP. And of course, there's lots of other different podcasts in this series around spouse, partner and children visas, and of course the Parents and Grandparents Program being PGP as well. You'll also find a lot more information over at CanadaMadeSimple.com. So the rules surrounding sponsoring other family members are slightly less well known generally. And it's really important to know that the IRCC, Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, do actually allow and facilitate and even encourage you to sponsor other family members in certain very key and specific situations. And so first up, who can sponsor generally to Canada? Well, first of all, you have to be 18 or over. You have to either be a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident or registered under Canada's Indian Act. Now, all of those people are eligible to sponsor their family to obtain Canadian permanent residence and ultimately then onwards towards Canadian citizenship as well. Now, the biggest difference between sponsoring someone as a permanent resident and sponsoring someone as a full Canadian citizen is that if you are a permanent resident sponsoring your eligible relative, you have to be based physically in Canada when you make the application, and of course when the application is granted as well. If you are a Canadian citizen, you can of course be based anywhere in the world when you make that application to sponsor your relative. And of course most citizens, permanent residents, they look to sponsor their spouse, partner, parents or grandparents. Although there are some other very specific options in terms of sponsoring relatives as well, and I think we're going to delve into that in a little bit more detail. So first up, it often surprises people to learn that one of the most common forms of relative or family class immigration to Canada is that of orphaned brothers, sisters, nephew, nieces or grandchildren being sponsored by an eligible Canadian citizen or Canadian permanent resident. Now, the IRCC, obviously, they state that you can sponsor an orphaned brother, sister, niece, nephew, grandchild if certain conditions are met. And those conditions are obviously that they are an orphan, so both of their parents have passed away, that they are below the age of 18, that they are not married, and they are certainly not all in a common law or conjugal relationship, and that they are your relative obviously by blood or through adoption as well. Now, The IRCC is also very specific that you cannot sponsor this family member if any of the following key criteria applies. So you will be unable to sponsor your orphaned brother, sister, niece, nephew or grandchild if they have a parent that is still alive, if the location of their parents is unknown, if they were abandoned by their parents, if they are being cared for by someone else while both of their parents are alive, or if their parent is in jail or otherwise detained. Now, that's a really interesting one. So, it is saying that even if your relative has been abandoned, or even if your relative is potentially a child, but living on their own, even in difficult circumstances, if there's no actual physical proof or documented proof that both parents have deceased, then your application is likely to be denied on this ground and for the family sponsorship application. As a different option, you can look at the little known other relative category. And this is where you can sponsor one relative, and only one, that is related by blood or adoption of any age, as long as all of these conditions are met. So not just one, all of these conditions have to be met in order to trigger the other relative sponsorship category. So, number one, the sponsor, i.e. the Canadian citizen or permanent resident, does not have a living relative that you could sponsor instead, such as a spouse, common law partner, conjugal partner, parent, grandparent, child, orphan, brother, sister, nephew, niece or grandchild. And number two, that the sponsor does not have any relatives that are Canadian citizens, permanent residents or registered under the Indian Act. Now, interestingly, with the other relative option, that other relative may have spouse, partner or indeed other dependent children that also want to come to Canada, and if this is the case, you need to include them on the same sponsorship application. So potentially, what the IRCC are saying here is that you can do that one other relative sponsorship. However, if that one other relative then has a spouse, partner and dependent children, then they can also be included on that same sponsorship application as well. Okay, so how does the sponsorship application process actually work? Well, interestingly, you have to make two applications at once. Okay, so you have to apply to sponsor your relatives, and they apply for permanent residency at the same time. So both of those applications, one, sponsor your sponsorship of the relatives, and two, their application for permanent residency, are both submitted to the IRCC at the same time. And for full details on how to make these applications without the need for a costly migration agent or lawyer, because absolutely these things are designed for you to be able to do yourself, then do head over to CanadaMadeSimple.com, where you'll find loads of guides that cover these absolute exacting topics and criteria.